Hello and welcome back to Fleetwood Area High School's election coverage for the 2016 presidential election. I'm Tristan Spana. This period we will be discussing the Second Amendment, and the only state voting is Iowa with 6 electoral votes. The polls will officially close in Wisconsin, Indiana, Illinois, and Michigan, and we have the results from some of those polls now. First, we have Illinois represented by Ms. Nongel's 5th period class. Its 20 electoral votes have been awarded to Trump with a final vote of 14-6. Trump claims Indiana and its 11 electoral votes. Mr. Carr's 5th period voted 11-5, giving the state to Trump. Moving on, we have Ms. Jarosinski's 1st period voting for the great state of Michigan. Tiger TV is confident in reporting the 16 electoral votes will go to Trump by a margin of 7. Mrs. Rankin's 5th period represented Wisconsin, went for Trump and in a tight victory. The Second Amendment is an issue that has been driving the Trump campaign and its supporters for over a year now. So we'll break it down in more detail in our panel discussion here in a moment. But first, let's go to our Election Day correspondent, Bianca Javaria, with a voter. Bianca.
Thanks, Tristan. I'm here with Mr. Barnett. I wanted to ask you how you think this mock election is going and if you think it's a good experience for our students.
I think the day's going pretty well. We've had some issues broadcast-wise here and there. I know period 1 didn't have sound in the broadcast, but the election's going well. The system's working good. It's been a long time coming. It's a lot of work. We've been practicing for the last month and a half for this. Mr. Carr's been doing a lot of work to get the social studies classes coordinated and scheduled. And really, I think this is invaluable for students to see. I mean, this is real world. The ballot that you vote in when you sit at one of those computers is the ballot you would see if you walked into the Fleetwood Fire Hall or up into town here at that polling place. It's 100% as real world as it gets, and that's something that I don't think we always deal with at school as much. So it's really kind of a neat experience, I think, for everyone to have.
All right. Well, back to Tristan.
Thanks, Bianca. Moving on to this period's panel discussion. Just to review, each period will be welcoming 2 student experts who've done extensive research on the topic of the period. They're here for a conversation on real issues, and the points that they argue are not necessarily aligned with their own political views. This period, our panelists are Alyssa Hall, representing the Clinton campaign, and Cole Chappelle, representing the Trump campaign. Thank you guys for coming in. This period, we're going to discuss the Second Amendment. Let's take a look at some of the candidates' views before we get into the meat of the discussion.
Well, first of all, I support the Second Amendment. I understand and respect the tradition of gun ownership. It goes back to the founding of our country. But I also believe that there can be and must be reasonable regulation. I think we need comprehensive background checks. We need to close the online loophole, close the gun show loophole. There's other matters that I think are sensible, that are the kind of reforms that would make a difference, that are not in any way conflicting with the Second Amendment.
I am a very strong supporter of the Second Amendment, and I'm very proud to have the endorsement of the NRA. We are going to appoint justices. This is the best way to help the Second Amendment. We are going to appoint justices that will feel very strongly about the Second Amendment, that will not do damage to the Second Amendment.
Both candidates have voiced support for the Second Amendment. What changes, if any, does your candidate propose in regulation of the Second Amendment? Alyssa?
All right. Well, first of all, a lot of people believe that what Hillary wants to do is she wants to completely eradicate the Second Amendment and say that no one can get any guns at all. But that's not necessarily true, because what she actually wants to do is require background checks for every American that wants to buy a gun. Because right now, the only time you need to get a background check is when you are buying a gun from a federal seller, which doesn't happen quite often because a lot of people go to private sellers to get their guns, and that should probably be enough to help get rid of the entire gun issue in general, because a lot of people are being killed from illegal weapons, and they're obtaining those weapons because they don't have to get a background check. So a lot of criminals are able to actually purchase weapons. And 44,000 citizens die from guns in the United States every year alone. So this would help to get rid of the negative connotation associated with guns. and help to clear up any misuse of them.
Cole, response?
Well, for the background checks, in 2010 alone, there were 118 million applications that were processed by background checks by the FBI. But Trump's plan is to make it harsher on felons who are caught with guns. He specifically cites a national implementation of Project Exile, which was a project in Richmond, Virginia that reduced gun crime by 60%. And it had a 22% yearly decline.
Alrighty. It seems today that a lot of violence or threats of violence have seemed to be directed at our school system. Just earlier this year, there was a student arrested in our country for terroristic threats directed at 4 schools in the area. Are there any changes to a gun law that can improve the safety in our schools?
Well, school shootings are a big deal because as of 2013, there have been at least 197 school shootings alone. And that statistic was as of August, so it could be even higher now. So what we could do to help get rid of that issue isn't necessarily change the gun law, but more in the school system alone. You could have better safety procedures in case of a school shooting, like the intruder drills could be improved, and they could happen more often just in case there's an actual threat. And all threats should always be taken seriously, even if it sounds kind of like a joke. And something that my old school did back in Arkansas is they had 2 cops on campus every day that were always there unless they were called off to do something like handle an actual crime. And they were there just patrolling the campus to make sure that nothing actually went wrong, because you could easily sneak a gun into a school. And that helped. There was never any gun threats. There's no violence ever at that school. So that could help improve the current situation.
I would have to agree with the police patrolling the campus. It sounds like a good idea, or some other form of armed security measure. I think that's a very good idea. But what Donald Trump says is that these mass shootings or school shootings that happen, a lot of times the people who do these things are not completely mentally healthy, and Donald Trump says that the mental health system needs to be fixed. It's not functioning properly. We need to do something about the mental health system in this country.
Yeah,
Alrighty.
that's good. I agree with that.
Alrighty. Well, thank you both. I know both of you are back later at least once more, so we'll see you later. That brings our discussion to a close. Let's head back on scene with Mina Isaac to get an eye on the polling place. Mina?
Thanks, Tristan. I'm here with Mr. Carr. Mr. Carr, how do you think the results, have they been surprising to you or not?
Not really. The results are kind of indicative of what I've been hearing a lot of the students say as far as where their support lies. Donald Trump is someone who has resonated with a lot of the students here at Fleetwood, and so the fact that he's been doing so well up to this point hasn't really surprised me that much.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Carr. We're going to kick it back to Tristan now. Tristan?
Thank you, Mina. That just about wraps up this period's election coverage. At the end of period 5B, Trump has a lead in the Electoral College. Coming up next period, we'll have results from Mississippi, while voting in 8 states: Texas, Minnesota, Nebraska, Missouri, Arkansas, Louisiana, Oklahoma, and Kansas takes place. That's a whopping 90 electoral votes that might put one of these candidates over the 270 needed to win the election. Our panel discussion next period will focus on foreign policy. That wraps our election day coverage for the period 5B. I'm Tristan Spaneth. We'll see you in 20.